Okay, welcome to this brief video in which we will be discussing the water quality monitoring implications of the Environment Act 2021. And today I'm absolutely delighted to have with me Philip Dunne MP, who's the MP for Ludlow, Bridge North and South Shropshire, has been since 2005. But much more importantly, he's, well, for the purposes of this discussion, he's chair of the Environmental Audit Committee, which is the committee that produced the seminal report Water Quality in Rivers, which impacted the Environment Act 2021. So thank you so much for joining us on your busy day, I'm sure, Philip. I wonder if you could kick off by briefly describing the workings of the committee and also perhaps lean into then what happened with the Water Quality in Rivers report.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for asking me to join you today. I'm very pleased to have this chance. So the Environmental Audit Committee, we've actually just celebrated our 25th anniversary. It was set up by the incoming Labour government in 1998, and it's a cross-party select committee in Parliament. It shares a unique characteristic with the Public Accounts Committee, and that is that we don't shadow a specific department of government. We can range right across government and go where we will, so long as it's connected with environmental policy or delivery against policy or has environmental consequences. So we can look at inquiries whether they're directly at government policy or indirectly. And we can look at private companies as we have done, for example, in fast fashion. We took an interest in water quality, really partly pushed by me because I'd had a private member's bill focused on looking at measures to reduce discharges of sewage into our waterways. And I persuaded my committee, which has 16 members, and we decide what we're going to do by a majority vote twice a year. We work out our programme. So I didn't force it upon them, but we all felt right across the committee that this was becoming a really significant issue. And it was time for parliamentary backbenchers to come together and make some recommendations to government about how they could change whatever was needed to be changed in order to stop this practice, which was getting out of control. It had been an emergency measure which allowed water treatment works to discharge when they were at risk of being overloaded from excessive surface water to discharge into our waterways, but had become increasingly routine. And we began to see the consequences of this with the real challenges for all the aquatic species that live in our rivers and real risks to public health of many of the human beings who like to use our rivers for recreation. So that was how it all came about.
And I understand that the Environment Act has some specific monitoring requirements. And also I suspect that you had an input in what those monitoring requirements would be. Perhaps you could tell us a bit about that.
Well, it was fortuitous that we were undertaking our inquiry more or less in parallel with the Environment Act going through Parliament. It concluded its passage through the House of Commons while we were sort of getting our inquiry underway. So we were still able, by working closely with campaign groups, members of the House of Lords, and frankly with government ministers who also wanted to make sure that this piece of legislation, which was the first major piece of environmental legislation since we'd left the EU, and it gave the government the opportunity to introduce standards and requirements, in particular in relation to their primary targets on water quality, air quality, soil quality, etc., which were potentially going to take the UK into a new place with new regulatory oversight from the Office of Environmental Protection, and enabled us to go further than was possible when we were in the EU. So it was very fortuitous that this major piece of legislation was underway while we were doing our inquiry. And as you say, the inquiry made a number of recommendations which fed into what became government amendments to the Environment Act, or Environment Bill as it then was, while it was going through the House of Lords during the course of the summer of 2021. And one of the main elements of that, one of our principal recommendations, was that you can't really improve quality of our waterways unless you know how bad they are to start with, and unless you can measure progress in future against a baseline. So establishing monitoring was absolutely key in my mind and the mind of the committees to improving the quality of our waterways. We'd had, as you know, the introduction of event duration monitors, which really began being installed in a big way from 2016 onwards. That was introduced under the coalition government. And as you know, this year we will now see 100% of event duration of treatment works having event duration monitors installed, and they are what has provided the data which has given the public the awareness of the problem from discharges, which was previously hidden from sight by and large, unless you were unfortunate enough to live near one. But the data that's come out through identifying the frequency and duration of spills and discharges is what has been picked up by NGOs like the Rivers Trust, who've done this outstanding job at putting a picture on the website of where the monitors are located and the information that they're now giving and is being published on an annual basis. In fact, I'm speaking to you just before the end of March, and in a few days' time, we'll get the latest release from those monitors for the 2022 year. There was a leak in the newspaper recently which said they are likely to be down about 20%. Now that's welcome. I suspect it's largely because of the very dry summer that we had last year. Lower rainfall than usual, but it's still, we shouldn't look a gift horse in the mouth, and it's good news if it's coming down. But of course, it's still too great. So for every outfall pipe from either a sewage treatment works or from a CSO, there will need to be monitoring devices upstream and downstream to provide data in near real time, meaning after a few minutes delay through telemetry attached to the monitor, which will go to the water company's data center. And from there, it will be available to the management of the water company to alert them when there has been an incident which might put them at risk of breaching their permits. Also will alert the Environment Agency, and also, I hope in fairly short order thereafter, will alert the public, so that if members of the public want to go and use that piece of river or the lake where it's installed, they'll be able to tell when the last spill occurred and whether it's safe to go and use the waterway.
Quite so. And so do you know what the timescales involved are likely to be for this? It's quite, that's a quite serious bit of monitoring infrastructure to be established.
It certainly is. It's serious. Well, it's facilitated thanks to technology. So we've now got spectrometry and devices which are available commercially to be able to assess multiple parameters in a single device. The telemetry exists to be able to get that information reported on without requiring a lab technician to take the sample, go back to the lab and so on, which was how it was done in the past and has been very expensive. This will now be done on an automatic basis for a set of chemical parameters and potentially biological parameters, which are also available, which I think will be the real game changer as far as the public are concerned. So I'm expecting DEFRA or the Environment Agency to run a consultation over the course of the next year or so to clarify what parameters these devices need to be monitoring, whether chemical or biological, because it's now possible to do that as well. And I think biological parameters will be really interesting to the public to check on safety for humans of entering waterways. There are devices now being trialed. In fact, in my own constituency, Severn Trent, who are at the cutting edge of some of these innovations, are trialing. They have 19 monitors right now in the River Team around Ludlow, and they're using that to identify some of the challenges of undertaking this quantity of testing. It's not, you've got to make sure that you put the monitors in the right place so that they'll be submerged in all conditions, so that they're not going to get disturbed by passing debris or detritus in the river, and so that they're not also going to be disturbed by curious animals or humans
Yeah.
wanting to see what's going on there. So this is not a straightforward task. It needs thinking through carefully. But I think during the next pricing review period, which begins in January 25, we will start to see these monitors being installed. And I would hope by the end of that 5-year period, we should have close to full coverage of the outfalls which need to be monitored.
Right. Perfect. That's really useful. Thank you so much for your time, Philip.